Hey guys, welcome back to Thriving in Love podcast, a podcast that challenges the status quo so couples can thrive as their authentic selves. Today on the show, we got Justin Tristao. He is a breathwork facilitator who works with both men and women to help them unlock their destiny. Justin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sana. Appreciate you having me on.
I love that I messaged you like on Friday and I have you on the show now. So thank you for your availability and your flexibility. So honored to have you on the show.
Yeah, very grateful. Excited to dive into whatever's present.
So tell us a little bit about you and how you started the journey to your aligned path.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people don't know this about me, and it's funny that I always open podcasts up like this, but I honestly have a business background. So a lot of what occurred inside of my inner awakening was I've been in real estate for 8 years. I recently sort of made the transition out of real estate of the business space in general. But long story short, to get to the sort of meat and bones of my story, when I got into the real estate industry, I was about 19, 20, and I had been a server. So I served at Olive Garden in different restaurants, which was a beautiful experience for me because that really developed the capacity to relate to humans, right? Like when you're working in a restaurant, there's a numerous amount of personalities that you get an opportunity to connect with on a daily basis. And I slowly made the transition from restaurant serving to real estate just because I felt like I could use that same skill set to create more financial freedom. But at that young age, I got into real estate thinking that the money and the success and the things that I was going to experience by sort of prospering in the real estate industry was going to make me happy and sort of so-called bring me into this ideal dream life. And what I found out was that I began to succeed very rapidly in the real estate industry. And, I made a lot of money per se for a young man at that age. And there was a point in time around the age of like 22, 23, where I started to wake up to these feelings inside of me. And I just felt this void, almost if you were to just pull like a puzzle piece out of a puzzle. And in the middle of that puzzle, there's just this void, this missing piece. And everywhere around that puzzle, it seemed like everything was in order, but there was just this big void right there in the middle of my heart. And that was when I started to ask the bigger questions, like, why am I here? And I started to experience what most people would call depression and anxiety, and or what I really feel called to say that it's an awakening of sort. That's the signals that the body and the soul are sending you in those moments to tell you that you're off path, and not off path in a negative way, but you're walking the wrong way. And those are the signals the body sends, which I now know, now that I'm sort of on the other side of that to some degree. But yeah, that was a big part of my awakening process, was beginning to see that everything in the outer world, the material, actually isn't what brings the inner fulfillment, the freedom and the peace that we seek inside. And there was no other person, there was no other place, there was no other item that was going to be able to provide that deep richness that I was seeking, that can only be touched when I began to enter into this deeper connection with what I would call self. And in that process, I began to study with many different traditions, teachers, cultures, religions, and I began to soak in what I feel to be this more rich information that can't be found sort of in the day-to-day basis. And I immersed myself in that the same way I immersed myself inside of real estate, which made me succeed in that industry. I started to sort of dabble deeper into a spiritual connection, and a lot of rapid things began to occur inside of my life, and a lot of transformation, inner transformation, and things that I just can't deny. I feel like I've seen and felt too much at this point, and that's really inspired me to take this path deeper, and begin to be inspired to share this with as many people as possible because of what it's brought me. And I feel like that's the greatest purpose anyone could live out.
Yeah, I love that. And our stories are very similar because I also was climbing the corporate ladder, doing the things by the book. And then I had this goal of like hitting six figures before I was 30. And once I did that, I felt so empty and so disconnected from like why I'm here and what I'm doing. And that's what, led me to quitting my job and traveling the world, trying to find some answers. I started my own company, Friendship Club, which is to connect humans. Because for me, my missing piece was loneliness. I felt like I just don't fit in. And when I started my company, tried to do it again the same traditional way that everybody does companies, like, trying to go the route of finding an investor and this and that. And everything felt so not aligned. And I was like, damn, I got to keep going on this journey of finding alignment. So it took me like almost like 4 years to find that inner peace. And that was when my husband and I chose to live in our own apartments. And that is when I unlocked all that inner child healing and deep inner work that I think really is what we need to get to this other side. So thank you for sharing that because it resonates so deeply with me. How did you get into this whole thing about like love? So are you in a relationship? Have you been in a relationship? Like, what's your relationship history?
Yeah, great question. I've actually never been in a relationship. I think maybe a lot of people would be surprised to think that because I speak on relationships, and I can already hear the plethora of people that are sharing in their own mind or thinking like, why are you speaking on relationships if you've never been in a true intimate one? But the truth is my life has been the epitome of the teacher in front of me through every relationship that I embark on. So I feel like I'm in a relationship with everything. And I think my journey with love specifically started with myself. And I think that when I was going through those very, very dark periods, some people may deem it to or call it the dark night of the soul, I began to realize that the true relationship begins with oneself. And if you're not able to cultivate the capacity to relate to yourself, to begin to understand yourself, your triggers, your emotions, your reactivities, then it'll be very hard to actually enter into a sacred communion with another individual if you don't have a level of maturity. And what I found out very quickly, and this is something that I've always held very near and dear to me since a young boy, actually, is that a lot of people enter into intimate relationships from a place of codependency and or a void that they're missing inside. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us do that. And I've promised myself at a young age, probably middle school, high school, that I would never enter into a relationship from a place of lack, that I wanted to enter into a relationship from a place of deep commitment and fullness. And whoever that individual is, I want to give her my all. And I was never ready for that. And I really do feel like God put me through those specific dark times to then refine this deep man that was latent inside of me, and to begin to understand myself at the deepest capacity so that when that deep love does come in, or a union with another individual in a romantic sense, that there's a level of maturity and there's a foundation that can't be swayed. And I just find that a lot of relationships nowadays, I would go on to say that it's as high as 85% or more, are built on very faulty relationships. And I think we're seeing the revealing of those deep shadow patterns that people have been hiding from for many years. And it's very difficult to be able to be in a relationship for 5, 10, 15 years. And then someone maybe goes through this awakening process and you begin to see that, yeah, looking behind, it's like, holy shit, this entire time I was never actually in a relationship. I was in a trauma bond or a karmic relationship is what I would say from more of an Eastern philosophical understanding. So yeah, I mean, that's my background, and I'm fascinated by human behavior. I'm fascinated by it. I've studied it for as long as I can remember. And I think that I'm very mindful and aware and conscious of the relationships that I enter into. And when that romantic partner does enter into my life, it's going to be a beautiful opportunity for me to continue to grow and evolve and refine myself with that mirror. But I do feel like I have many mirrors in my life, and I feel like everyone can be your teacher outside of a romantic relationship.
I am a big, big believer, even though I am married and I have my husband as a mirror, that the mirrors don't only have to be romantic love. Once I understood that there is so much love out there that is not just romantic love, that is really what actually helped me make my relationship with my husband so much better because I was not putting all of that pressure on him to like help me or just guide me through my evolution, right? So like once we understand that you don't have to have that relationship. Like, take that pressure off, and you can still hit enlightenment or evolve as a human being without that intimate partner. Like, when you do realize that your entire relationship with love, like even in romantic relationships, right? Like, even in the most intimate relationship of your life, all my husband is doing is creating a container for me to find more self love. So, like, if you're able to do that without that intimate partner, it all works as long as the consciousness is there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, a big part of, beautifully said, and a big part of my path, which I didn't know in the moment, but I just knew that this, I don't know, whoever listens in regards to their religious beliefs, I'm calling it God, but I feel like God was guiding me in those moments. I would be so distracted from the outer world and sexual pleasures and these different distractions of the flesh per se. And I really feel like when individuals begin to sort of bring deeper awareness to those patterns within themselves, and you could do this with a partner as well. I'm a lover of individual awakening because I feel like that's the future. That's the future of where we're heading as a species.
I always say that my awakening was very individual. It's not like my husband was like my healer or anything like that. He barely believes in spirituality. Like, he's just like living his life. And I'm just like using our interaction to go deeper into my own inner world. Solitude is like my most important practice, right? Like, that's when I process everything and I try to understand everything that is happening in my life and find that deeper meaning. But yeah, like I think it's all individual, no matter what your path is, because the journey is just back home to yourself.
Mm, absolutely, I agree.
And I think that we all need to have our unique ways of getting there so that 8 billion people can have people to look up to that they relate with. And that's why I love bringing on people from different paths. And that's why I always say in the beginning of the podcast, this is to challenge the status quo, to create unique love stories that work for your authentic self. Like, my journey is just mine. If it resonates with you, great. But not everybody's going to resonate with my story. But I hope that this platform that I create can just igniting those codes within people to show them different ways of reaching what we're all aiming for, which is love with our own self.
That's beautiful.
What were some modalities that you first started using to begin your journey? And did you have to like do trial and error, or do you feel like your intuition guided you towards things that worked?
Yeah, a beautiful question. I think what comes to my mind before I were to answer that question is I think when you begin to awaken to this greater reality, you begin to sense that there's this greater intelligence guiding you, whether you want to call it your higher self, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it Allah, whatever it is, you begin to just sense that there's this greater intelligence connecting with you. And the more that you connect with it consciously, the more that it begins to connect with you. And there's almost this antenna that begins to grow. So what I found was that I was connected to that intelligence. In fact, I feel like we all are. But when I went through that process, it gave me more reverence to that intelligence that was moving through me. And in that process, I began to be aware of those tools that were presenting themselves, the information, the material needed to further my evolution as a soul and a spirit and a human. And so these different tools, breathwork was one of the ones that was really big for me. And when people think breathwork, breathwork is a very large modality. Breathwork is something that we're doing right now as we actually have this conversation, and as whoever's listening is listening, we're breathing in this moment. I feel like a lot of the dis-ease on our planet is due to the lack of awareness, and lack of awareness is simply the lack of the awareness of your breath. You can't be aware of your breath and dis-ease in the same moment, or you can't be unaware of your breath and not be present inside of the what's happening inside of you and all around you. So the modality of breath has been one of my greatest life's teachers. It's really assisted me to not only get to know myself on a deeper level, to get to know my own emotional reactions, to get to know where I distract myself and fall short and sort of deplete my energy into things that are not serving me. and it really began to remind me of who I truly am, you know. And I think the breath and that modality is here to reawaken humanity's highest potential. And when you do the translation of breath, it translates to spirit. And I think the what the world is missing right now is connection to spirit. And spirit is nothing more than the breath. So if we're aware of our breath, we're aware of our spirit. And spirit is this connection to the divine. It's the connection to God. So a lot of what we're experiencing in the conflict through our relationships, I mean, we're in a crazy time when war, countries are fighting each other, and there's a lot of violence happening. I just feel that if you're connected to spirit and your breath in that way, it's very hard to allow any human reactivity to sway you, because there's an awareness almost beyond the reaction. There's an awareness beyond the identification of who you are, which means that if you reach that point, then yourself and I must be made from the same essence. And how can you ever harm another and or enter into a conflict for superficial reasons when you are of the same spirit? So yeah, breathwork has been a big modality for me.
That was so beautifully said. I just want to like hold space for that real quick because that was so powerful and everything that I am trying to say. But again, as a Muslim who like grew up Muslim, I don't really identify as any one religion now, but it's just music to my ears. What you said, like it's everything that I've been trying to say is that no human can own a land, first and foremost. Like we're borrowing this land from Mother Nature, from source, from higher powers, right? Like we don't own anything here. We're here for a moment of time to do the best we can to move the needle forward towards love. I think that repeating history, it's just going to cause self destruction as a human race. Yeah. So everything you just said, love it.
We're going deep into a whole nother subject if we want to open that up.
And I actually don't mind, and I feel I do get flack for it, right? Like I have my Muslim friends that are like, "Oh, why aren't you speaking up for Palestine?" And I'm like, "Girl, I've been raising money for Palestine and Gaza since I was in high school. What is the point of being a keyboard warrior instead of just being like a lover and spreading more love? Like, isn't that what the world needs? We don't need keyboard warriors. We've tried that for so long. It's not working. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm tired.
Yeah. I think there's a time and place for both, and I really enjoy what you shared in regards to the land, because I think, I've studied with pretty much every religion out there. And what I really feel like we all, I don't attribute myself to any specific religion in any way, shape, or form. I actually find beauty in them all. But I think that what we're all seeking to understand is that we're inhabiting this earth together. And until we're able to reach a level of balance and harmony amongst each other, which is beyond any land, it's beyond any race, it's beyond any color, it's beyond any gender. When we begin to understand each other at that deep level, then I think that's when we begin to experience what everyone would call heaven, or in many different world religions they call it different things, but like that's what we're seeking. I think that a lot of what's occurring is really illuminating these patterns that have been running for eons. And I think it's time for those things to be eradicated. And if we can't see them, then it can't be released. So I think that there is this, um, I have deep empathy for all of the things that are going on, and I use my platform to bring awareness to it. But I do think that this is an opportunity for the world to begin to wake up to the fact that there is an energy that's opposite of love, that is wanting to separate and divide us. And until we're able to become aware of those things inside of ourselves, then we'll never be able to relate inside of a relationship. And the crazy thing is that the same conflict that we're experiencing now on a collective scale inside of these countries is the same conflict that emerges inside of a man and a woman. It's the battle of the sexes, per se, that's been running
I was
for,
just gonna say, it
yeah,
all
so it goes
relates.
deep.
And that's why the work I do is what I do. On the outside, it looks like I'm just helping married couples connect deeper with each other. But, on a deeper spiritual level, I do this work because once we have that peace, harmony, joy in our homes, and we understand how to get it in our homes with like our most intimate relationships, that is how we can expand our mind, open our heart, to things that make us want to kill the other person, right? And like those are the moments where I'm like being asked to like expand my heart even more and to open my mind even more and to create enough space for two different realities to coexist in one household so that we can have peace. So if I could do that in my house, then it makes it easier to do it out in the world too. Easier to do it with a relationship that I'm not so intimate with, that doesn't make me want to go crazy no matter how much like I meditate and how much inner peace I find. And I think that's the most fun thing about our intimate relationships is like it challenges you so much every like moment that you get triggered and you're just being asked over and over and over again to just open your mind more, open your heart more, just have more love, have more love. How can we let love work through us in this moment? And it just spreads, right? Like when a well loved person just exudes love, you can't not. It's like this guy's accepting me for like all the things that I'm like the most ashamed for and the things that I like think are the worst things about me, and he's just there holding space and loving me through it all anyway. And it's like how can I hold anything against anyone? I think that's the great blessing. So in your opinion, what do you consider an awakened woman?
Great question. Mm, yeah. Well, I think it's probably important to understand what an awakened woman isn't first. And I think that it's important to share that I feel in the society that we live in, we've adapted to a great level of inequality when it comes down to energies, right? Masculine and feminine energies in general. And I think it's important to understand that we have both of those energies inside of ourselves first before I go any further, because this can be sometimes triggering for some people in these topics. Not only triggering, but it can also get um, it can get very confusing. But what I will say is, from working with hundreds, if not thousands, of women at this point and studying thousands of women just from my practice, I find that what a lot of women struggle to do in these times is to soften and surrender to their true feminine essence. And I think that there's nothing more powerful than a woman that has reawakened and reclaimed her feminine power. Meaning, like, I think a lot of teachers out there share that women are just supposed to be soft and surrendered, but not have that fierce love or fierce devotion or
They
fierce,
avoid their shadow.
yeah, for sure. And I think that, both of those merged inside of one is a powerful component. But I think that there's also reactive natures inside of what we're speaking about, and I think that there's an unhealthy extreme to both regards. I think that there's a lot of women out there that can almost be people pleasers to the fact that they don't really honor, to the point that they don't honor themselves, they don't honor their boundaries, they allow people to step all over them, they allow the society to step all over them. And this is what we've seen inside of the patriarchy that is now sort of slowly, in my opinion, dissipating, because women have had enough of that shit. And I think that that's that fierce feminine that's beginning to reawaken, which is needed to then eventually
Balance the
sort of,
scales.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think that an awakened woman knows how to balance both of the energies inside of herself and and knows when to soften and surrender to a man or, a relationship. Yeah, this is where things get interesting for me. I think ultimately any human being has the capacity to be able to dance between those two energies and choose which one to navigate with at any point in time. I honestly think that when you open up social media and follow these other relationship coaches, they're still speaking on a very outdated understanding of what it means to be a man and a woman. And I don't think that the role is for a woman to just be this soft and surrendered woman and this man to be this leading force. I think that both have the capacity to be able to dance between those energies when necessary.
I think the reason it gets complicated is because within the relationship, I'm all soft. Like, I mean, there are times where I'll like put my foot down and my boundaries, of course, right? But what women crave is to have that sense of safety, and men crave peace, right? So when you're home, that's when we are more in our feminine, but the beauty of it is that when we're out in the world and we're like creating our legacy, using our voice, we're, being the leader that we are here to become, that's when we're in our masculine energy. So we use so much of our masculine out in the world that when we're home, we just want to be in our feminine. Like we're just so tired and like of like using all that, like exerting all that energy. And I think that's where that disconnect happens because it's not about just like being soft and like surrendering to your man all the time because the man likes the challenge too. So, like, it is that beautiful. I love that you said it's a dance because I say that where it's like a tango. Like, tango is like you literally are like learning when to lead, when to surrender, when to lead, when to surrender. And it's just like this ebb and flow. And that's what makes life fun. Like, if it's all just like in one way, I think that life can easily get really boring and a lot of pressure can be on the masculine. And then he can burn out and get exhausted. It's that beautiful ebb and flow of like a lifelong journey of being partners. And I think that's where the new paradigm is heading to is we're no longer needing marriage. First and foremost, you do not need to be married is something I always say. But if you choose to be married, do it because you want a partner to dance through this life with, not because you want someone to be your savior and lead you. And like same with the man, like don't get married because you feeling that void of wanting someone to take care of you. Like you could take care of yourself. A woman can take care of herself. We don't need each other for bare necessities anymore at all, which is the most interesting time to be married because now we're all making our own rules where it's like, okay, well, what are our values? What makes us, thrive? What helps us feel supported and encouraged without that savior complex? It's fun.
Yeah.
If you met a woman that like, you think she's like an incredible woman, she's like awakened and you feel that energy and she comes to you and she's like, "Oh, I'm a witch." What would be your reaction to that?
I've never had that question. Yeah, I mean, I guess my question back to you would be, what do you define a witch to be?
What do you define to be a witch?
I mean, yeah, I think that this is an interesting topic. I wouldn't be able to like define it by myself, but if you're speaking that like a woman is in tune with her sort of intuition and yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of that word because I think that our society has programmed us to believe that a witch is maybe like someone that, yeah, maybe like works with magic and stuff, black magic. And yeah, again, I think that we got to be careful when we're speaking about these things because there are people that are out there that may not have the most pure intentions. And I think that there's a lot of dark magic that is occurring here on this planet in this moment. So it would depend what you're referencing in regards to that word specifically.
No, it's funny that you say that. And I guess it's true because it does happen. I feel like your spiritual gifts can't really activate until you have a pure heart. And maybe there are workarounds around that where it's like, they find ways to like do voodoo and black magic and things like that. Because clearly it does happen. But I know for like me and my journey, like I didn't even know that I had any spiritual gifts until I feel like I was purifying my heart over and over and over again. Like as many times as I needed to like let go and let go and let go of more and more of my judgment, my shame, my guilt, my fear. And to me, like a woman is just a woman in total control of herself. So I use it as like an acronym. And I think that that's a woman who cannot be swayed because she is just so rooted in her truth with her source.
Well, if that's what you mean by that word, then yes.
But I love to hear people's reactions to it because I think there's like a movement happening right now in like the awakened women space where we are realizing that we do have these spiritual gifts and we're like, wait, are we witches? Like, what does this mean? And then we're like BCC just came out with a new podcast called Witch. And it's really fascinating to like demantle and question what we know to be true of like a witch to the reality of it, which is really just a woman deeply connected to her intuition and her spiritual gifts.
Yeah, I'm not too well versed in regards to that word. I mean, I would share that, if I had to play the other side, I do think that there are women that are coming off of this patriarchal sort of oppression, and then they're entering into this full extreme of the other side of that, and finally they're getting a taste of this power, and with great power comes great responsibility. And I love what you said in regards to the purification of the heart and the soul, because I think that, yeah, and this sort of trigger warning for a moment, like I do think women are stepping into that space, and they're abusing that power, and I see it very often through my platform, where like that intuition isn't to be used as a weapon for someone else, and that's my thought on that.
I agree. No, I think that's truth. That is 100% truth.
And I think that there's a lot of people in the spiritual space that are utilizing those spiritual gifts to unconsciously, which is the scary part, unconsciously misguide individuals into potential wrong directions due to what they think is right. And this is a misuse of power, because true power comes when there's no one there for the power to be used. And that's what you shared in regards to the purification of the heart, purification of the soul, because when it's just awareness, and this is where you begin walking a fine line that words can never do justice, but like there has to be no one there for the wisdom to truly move through. And if there's still an identity of form there, then you'll still continue to utilize. I was going to make this post today, but I didn't have time. It's like, is it your intuition guiding you, or is it your traumas misleading you? And I think that there's a lot of people that still have that ego or connection to these parts of themselves that they seek to
The wounded feminine, right?
it's definitely a wounded, yeah, it's a wounded
Yeah.
aspect for sure.
So, how do you work with your clients in that kind of an aspect when they just, trusting their ego to be their intuition?
Yeah, and this is where masculine and feminine dynamics will eventually have to dissolve from what we know it, because it still continues to, for example, like if I were to approach it there and a woman's in front of me, then it would be very hard for her to trust what's actually occurring through me. So as a human being, this is why I'm interested in individual awakening, because if we just simply begin to remove the patterns, the unconscious patterns that we continue to operate in on a daily basis, and we bring more awareness to those parts of ourselves that are still lacking reconciliation or love or acceptance, then we'll very soon come to the heart of why we still want that power from another source, or that why we still seek to rise above. And I think that if when you come to that kind of conclusion, or when you actually begin to do the true inner work, you reach this point, no matter what gender you are, where you see this stuff as sort of a game, and you're not really interested. It's the same, like I wanted to rise in my real estate career because I wanted that power or that recognition or those things that I never got as a child. And I think the same thing is happening in the spiritual community, and it's very dangerous, because now people are thinking that the same game that they played in the corporate game, they're now playing inside of a spiritual game, and that's where things get really, really dangerous, because it's the same ego. It's actually just masked in a spiritual character.
Spiritual ego. People
Yeah,
talk about it all the time. Yeah.
I think it's the most subtlest ego of them all. In fact,
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because on my journey, I definitely hit a phase of that for sure, where I was like, I'm God, I'm a prophet, I'm Christ consciousness, like I am here to like save humanity, right? And like, being in that space, I don't know, I didn't like it. I was like, I don't want the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like this is a lot of pressure. And like, who am I to tell people how to live or like what's right for them, right? Like a proper healer guide literally is just a mirror. And we ask you questions to find your own intuition, have you go, find your own truth. And I think when we take that pressure off our shoulders, I feel like a lot of people are going to be so much happier as humans and just be like, oh, this is so nice. Like, we don't need to be carrying all this pressure to like save people, and we can't. I know firsthand that you cannot save another human being because I tried with my husband. I fell into that trap of being that awakened woman who is like, babe, I know better, I found answers, like I got this for us. And he's like, I don't need to believe what you believe. And that was a big moment for me where I was like, wait, but then that means like we got to get a divorce. Like we can't be together. I need to be with an awakened man. And what I realized that the true awakened human being is someone who like understands that there's a bigger meaning and like we're spiritual beings, but enjoys the human experience and like the limitations of being a human and like making peace with that and accepting that and being like, I'm just here to live my life. And like the most like joyful, happy, like, and grief. Like grief is like such an expander, and the failure, it's such a teacher, and just like the lessons that we're here to learn as humans. And I don't know, I think like it's like a circle of life where people reach this enlightenment phase, spiritual ego, and then they have like a humbling back down to earth.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's happening right now.
Mm. And how can we like make sure that, I guess, just spreading our message, right? Like over and over again and hoping that it attracts the right people who are ready for that next phase after spiritual ego.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I'm following your question, but what I will share is I think that's why I'm fascinated by breath work, is because breath work empowers the individual. And I think that a lot of coaches and the things that we're seeing on social media now, it's like everyone's wanting to instill their beliefs inside of other people. And what I enjoy, and I'm victim to that too. I mean, I use social media to sort of share and trigger people into this.
You know what I love about your social media though? You always ask, do you agree?
Mm,
You never say, hey, this is fact.
I would never say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that. And before I just want to close this share with the breath work. You know, I think the reason why I'm so passionate about breath work is it brings people into their own shit, and there's really no running from what's occurring inside of your own personal process. And I think that the moment that someone has access to their subconscious or their unconscious behaviors, thoughts, feelings, and they're able to empower themselves to become their own healer. And I think that, as you mentioned prior, that's the most empowering thing one can do. In fact, I think my teachers that showed up for me in my life, they didn't hold me through my process the way that most people would think that they would need to be held. They held me almost from a spaciousness and empowered me to find the answers within myself. And I think some of the greatest teachers don't give you the answer. They just sort of point you where to look so that you can find that answer for yourself. And I think that the breath is one of the greatest tools to be able to assist people to find that answer, no matter what you're going through inside of your relationship, no matter if you're masculine, you're feminine, if you're wounded, if you're this, if you're that. It's like ultimately it's inside of you that needs to be seen and reconciled. And the world will continue to reflect back to you what you haven't healed inside. And that'll show up in your relationships, it'll show up in your finances, it'll show up inside of your entire reflection of your outer reality. So I think the game ultimately is going inside, reconciling those aspects within oneself so that then you can show up in a relationship and in the world to your greatest potential, your greatest capacity. I think things get interesting when you're in a relationship and those inner awakenings begin to occur. There's sort of a transformation that occurs. You were a caterpillar, you transform into a butterfly. Then there's a lot of conflict because the person that your partner thought that they married or got into a relationship with, there's kind of a twist now, and it challenges him or her to grow into their self. So I think that that's
We
where
had a lot of
things,
that.
yeah. How did you guys work through that though? Like being that he maybe isn't stepping onto a spiritual path per se, because I find a lot of women step away from a relationship because of that. But it's interesting because it sounds like you've actually done the opposite, and you've almost accepted him where he was. So I'm actually curious. I don't know if this is possible, but
Well,
I'm curious your
luckily,
thoughts.
I found out like through my journey is that he actually is awakened in his own way. He's just like an enlightened being, right? So like he always grounds me and like challenges me and questions me. What I love about our union is that I see it as he is so anchored in the 3D and I am awakening to the 5D. So how can I balance the two? So he really is my grounding force to be like, hey babe, I just found out this information in the 5D. How can I integrate and embody this wisdom into the human experience. And we have these like fascinating conversations because I think his mind is brilliant. And I see it as we're two different universes. And we are finding that bridge on how can we bridge the 5D and the 3D. And I think that to me is like sacred union.
Mm,
Like, how can we bridge heaven on earth?
yeah, you guys are dancing with each other in the most human way. That's awesome. I mean, that's cool that you're able to find that acceptance inside of that process.
I mean, I got challenged so much. There were so many times where I had these deep, deep feelings of like, you need to leave him. There's a divine masculine out there for you. And I was like, sat with that for a while. And I was like, is this fear or is this my true intuition? And just like allowing time to reveal and being so consciously aware of all the signs and synchronicities and like being patient because I used to have a very anxious attachment style. So I would just be like, oh, this is like a sign from the universe. So I gotta break up with him, blah blah blah. And then just journaling, and sitting with nature and sitting with the trees and breathing and just like really allowing time to reveal the truth.
It's so powerful what you're sharing, and I want to speak to it because I don't know if there's any spiritual women that are stuck in the new age movement, because I think a lot of this stuff is beginning to reveal itself at a rapid pace. And I actually commend you for the courage that you had to not listen to those impulses, because I think a lot of people, and I'm not going to genderize this, but I think a lot of people get caught in emotional reactivity and call it intuition. And I think that a lot of people that are out there speaking about divine masculine and these twin flames and like all of this stuff, it gets very confusing. And if you're ingesting all of that into your mind,
Yeah.
especially as a woman, that's why a lot of men are confused, because they're sensing into all of these things that are occurring inside of that woman's life. And it also can be very toxic. The way that
Extremely.
can move
Yeah.
through someone. So it's important to begin to discern what's emotional reactivity and the volatileness of our emotions, and what's the clear channel of intuition.
And it always goes back to that breath work, right? It's like, how does it feel in your body?
Yeah.
It tells you everything. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I learned a whole new side of spiritual people out there because I guess I'm not in that world of dark, like spiritual world. But thank you for enlightening me on that. And how can my audience find you? What do you have going on right now where people can work with you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I mean, Instagram's probably the best way to connect with me, and it's my first and last name. I have a men's group that's going to be launching here pretty soon, and I host breathwork sessions in Southern California. That's where I'm located. There's a lot of beautiful things that are on the precipice as well, for sure.
Amazing. I'll put all your links below so people can easily find you. And thanks so much for being here.
Appreciate it.